The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to our webinar on COVID-19 and the new world of mining communications. I'm Andrew Thake, Global Head of Content, Production and Strategy for Mines and Money. Before we go on, a couple of housekeeping comments. The webinar is scheduled to run for 45 minutes. You can ask questions at any time by using the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen. This is a brief introduction to today's webinar. COVID-19 won't just change how you communicate over the next 3 months. Its impact will be felt for many years to come. So, due just to the communications challenge posed by COVID-19, what and how do you communicate with internal stakeholders? What and how do you communicate with external stakeholders? And if COVID-19 disrupts your operations, what do you do? What might you be getting to do? To help me answer these questions for today's webinar, we are joined by Vivian from Tavistock, a leading London-based corporate and financial communications consultancy with over 40 mining clients, and Ilja, Graulich, Head of Investor Relations and Communications at Tharisa, a leading low-cost producer of EGM and chrome concentrates. Tharisa also incorporates mining, processing, certification, marketing, sales, and logistics. A warm welcome, Charles and Ilja.
Thanks.
As an opening question to both of you, has anything in your combined experience prepared you for some of the communication challenges posed by COVID-19? Perhaps I can go to yourself first, Charles, followed by Ilja.
Maybe the 87 crash, possibly. But I think that actually pales into insignificance due to the fact that this pandemic has never been witnessed in a generation. Plus, the 87 crash was caused by a number of factors. This situation is faced by a single factor that has common effects globally, and at present we don't have a solution. So I would say no.
Mm-hmm. And yourself, yeah?
I can't remember the 87 crash, sorry Charles, but certainly I think what it boils down to is experience. I'm dealing with an investor who's experiencing his first market crash, so I think there's most probably more panic out there than what is absolutely necessary. I think in these environments, experience comes to the core, and basically you need to say to yourself, okay, I've seen this before, I've seen parts of this movie before, how can I act on this? Importantly is you need to draw from that experience and put structures into place. And I guess if I had to draw on an experience in myself previously in mining companies that I've worked for in previous occasions, we have had mining accidents, which I think you have to react very quickly, whereas fortuitously with these events you had more time to act on these events and start preparing more, whereas mining accidents, obviously you have a lot of time to prepare in advance of a potential accident. You know something might happen, so you can prepare yourself for that. But if I had to sum it up, and because this enemy is so unknown and we don't know what we're dealing with here, the simple answer is no. I don't think anybody is entirely prepared for this. You simply have to draw on the experiences from various past experiences to say, okay, how do we deal, or how do we put them together in this puzzle?
And Ilja, how have you been taking care of your staff?
Sure. All right. In a number of ways. We prepared early for this. From a personal experience, I had family in Italy who contracted the virus very early. It suddenly brought home realism to us, and this was in the middle of February. We then started talking internally in the company as a management team to say, how do we deal with this? We were very early in terms of looking at various options, starting with hand sanitizers, starting with educational campaigns, and we were fortuitously already on the mine, where we have 3,000 employees. We already had plans in place to communicate on a general basis. As you can imagine, working in a developed country like South Africa, we have other issues that we need to deal with, starting with TB, starting with HIV infection rates. So we have generally very good communication lines in place for these people to learn generally about health, well-being and hygiene in the environment. So we used those communication lines and simply started communicating what was provided to us by both the World Health Organization and the Minerals Council in South Africa, who were very early onto the platform to say these are the communications we needed to go out. Fortuitously on site, we can talk mostly English, but as you can imagine, some of the other operations around us, the vernacular becomes a complex issue. How does one translate COVID-19 into, let's say, Zulu or Xhosa language in the case of South Africa? So we started that very early. We started shutting down external meetings very early, and we moved very quickly onto Zoom, Teams, various other electronic ways of communication. And fortuitously, the staff internally took it very seriously and said, okay, well, if this is how we're going to, if this is how the company is going to react, maybe we need to react with the same professionalism. So we are very lucky in the sense that we have had no cases at the head office and on site with regards to COVID. But it is still early days here in South Africa, and hopefully this lockdown that we're in right now will assist in what we now call #flatten the curve.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that, Ilja. And then Charles, how did Tavistock react, and how did you look after your staff?
They're very different to Ilja. I mean, as you, well, Tavistock is a London-based communications agency specializing in the mining sector, amongst others. So as it's a London-based office, we've been adhering to government advice over the past 3 weeks and working from home from 3 weeks ago. And it's all about connection, you know, making sure everyone's okay, speaking to all our staff daily and bi-weekly on how their conditions is, and also just contact all the time. So very different as a London-based communications agency compared to Ilja's business.
Mm-hmm. Let's kind of like move on to some of the issues with regards to external communication. Charles, what's been your advice to clients as to how they should best communicate with external stakeholders?
Well, we've been communicating to clients literally over the past 10 days to 2 weeks ago, saying that the first thing they've got to do is to release a COVID-19 update with regards to the impact on operations, but most importantly, updating external stakeholders on the well-being of their employees. And that is the priority, to ensure that all stakeholders are fully aware of the welfare, well-being, and of the workforce. And so we've been very much helping clients with constructing that narrative, making sure that it's full disclosure, and also to ensure that stakeholders understand, you know, how is the company actually looking forward? How is it going to try and monitor, or how to address this going forward, and how is it going to minimize disruption to its operations?
Mm-hmm. And you're obviously facing a lockdown at the moment in South Africa. How are you working with the government?
Sure. I think there's two steps. Obviously at Tharisa level, we have with the local government both the minerals department and various other government departments that we work with. We have stakeholder groupings on the ground that we work with on a day-to-day basis anyway. I think the complex issue that you need to understand is that we have a number of families that live in the greater surrounding area around the mine. Some of them are employed by us, some of them are not. As part of our social and labor plan around the mine, we do take care of the local community when it comes to providing basic needs and services. So I think that is the one issue that you need to consider, where you suddenly have to say, okay, you're not operating, but how do you communicate, or how do you deal with the issues in the community that obviously continue to operate as a community where you have certain responsibilities to. So it was made very clear to the government from our side that while we're happy to go into care and maintenance, and that we need to look at that, we need a certain number of people on site, not only to look after the care and maintenance of the operations. You can imagine 350, 400 pieces of Caterpillar equipment on site. They can't just simply stand there for 3 weeks. They have to be looked after. So we do have care and maintenance staff on site, and the government was very quick to provide the necessary permission for that. And the government is also very quick to provide permission for us to continue with our work into the local community. So we still provide water, we still provide sewage or refuse collection, and as part of a foundation that's affiliated to Tharisa, we are looking at food parcels into the local community now, and we're busy working with some stakeholders on that side, where we will be providing food parcels to roughly 1,500 families in the local community, and those food parcels should last hopefully around about 2 weeks. But the inverse is we have, fortuitously over the last 2 years, the Minerals Council in South Africa as an umbrella body for the mining industry has really come to its own. I think the relationship with the government, which was very, very tense in previous regimes, has strengthened in the sense that it's a very open relationship. The Minerals Council has a lot of communication with the Mining Ministry, and because this was an issue that nobody could plan for, as we discussed in the first question, the communication lines between the Minerals Council, who represent the mining companies, and we're a member of the Minerals Council, and the government departments has been very open. I would say that they communicate virtually daily, if not more than that. And the minister, to his credit, has made himself available very quickly and very often to go see the Minerals Council and deal with some of the issues. He's done similar with the unions, who obviously have some issues that they would like to address, and he's willing to listen to that. And to be quite frank, the government overall in South Africa has been very good at communicating, certainly from the president down, where he has made himself available as much as possible to update the nation as a whole in terms of issues to deal with. So we've been very lucky on that front, in the sense that the communication lines have been open, and if the communication lines are open, you can start addressing issues. We received, for 2 permissions that we required on site, we received permissions at 1:30 in the morning from the Director General in the Mines Department. They were still working. So we've been lucky on that front. And I wouldn't say we've taken advantage of it, but we've said, well, if this is how the government provides a service, well, let's provide our responsibility in return. And that's exactly how we've been acting with the government.
So you've obviously put your operations into care and maintenance. You've also been involved in delivery of food parcels to the local community. What are sort of other measures has Tharisa undertaken in response, or planning to undertake in response to COVID-19?
So, you know, we don't know how long this is going to last. We 13 days into lockdown, next week Thursday. The pressure is going to be massive on industry to get going again. We were already in a very weak economic position, and the mining industry employs 350 to 400,000 people, which, if you think about the snowballing effect, is anywhere between 6 and 10 people reliant on these employees. So that's the tough one. We are looking at ways of maximizing the lockdown, in the sense that we can employ as many people as possible to look after the maintenance. So at least that these individuals will receive, all our employees are getting their salary for this 3-week lockdown. I think that's the first important step to note. But there is still a question mark from government side whether they have to take leave, they're forced to take leave, or whether this leave is not going to be deducted from them. So we've offered some of our employees from care and maintenance to come to site. Obviously, that means that they don't fall into leave category, and obviously there's no negative effect on any employee if they do not come to site. So we've simply, at the mine site level, we are in constant communication with them. These days, modern communication through WhatsApp, SMSs, various other things work quite well. Our workforce is relatively well educated, minimum of school leaving certificates, so to communicate with them via smartphones these days is very good. 85% of our employees are from the local greater community, so to get into the community is possible, although obviously there are restrictions under the government rules with regards to going out and communicating or social distancing, but we do have certain permissions to go out and to try and communicate via stakeholder groups to them. And then at corporate office, very simply, everybody is working from home. We've got fantastic IT systems in place. We have a wellness company that standby, has always been on standby for the company. People can phone in for anything if they're feeling ill, to ask questions right down to psychological issues. There's WhatsApp groups amongst some of the staff that have started up just to talk to one another. And then as an executive of the company, we have an 8:30 COVID meeting every morning, and there's from every sphere of the company, there are executives present at that meeting, and everything gets discussed. And the rest of the time, just like we're doing right now, we communicate via the camera on our laptop or telephones. So we stay as far away as possible from one another. The office has been cleaned professionally, not that we had any concerns beforehand, but it also means that once staff comes back to the office, that they feel comfortable that the office has at least has been cleaned. Each staff member received well before this lockdown started. We all have alcohol sanitizers on our desks. You know, as I said previously, the social distancing, no touching, was looked at very, very early. We had 2 individuals who were still traveling, were coming back, they self-isolated. So we really took all the steps that the government, the WHO, and us internally put in place. We took those very seriously, and I think that has helped us, as I said.
Okay. We've had a couple of questions sent in by the audience, so I'm going to pose the first of the audience questions to Charles. How should mining companies adapt their communications to every country and community that they operate with?
Big question. I think the first thing is, in terms of communicating to all stakeholders, the first thing is it's all about disclosure. It's very important that all stakeholders fully understand exactly what the company has agreed in terms of policy of handling COVID-19, that the workforce is safe, and measures are put in place that they are fully in touch with what the company is doing and how it will, how it possibly could impact disrupt operations. I think in terms of the shareholders, look, the shareholders' main concern is their investment. So it's a slightly different type of audience. Obviously, they want to know what the impact is. They're obviously looking at share prices the whole time. In terms of results and AGM and all those sort of financial calendar aspects of disclosing information, of course, that shareholders need to be told that there could be possible delays. There could be a change of format with regards to what we're doing now, the virtual video idea, conferencing. It's adapting to a new mindset, but the most important part of communication is, first off, you've got to communicate more. You've got to be, I mean, virtually, especially internal to your internal stakeholders, there's got to be a 24/7 helpline or access for somebody to ask for some support or help if they have any question. There is obviously aspects with other mining companies that their workforce doesn't have access to the internet, which is critical. So mining companies need to try and find other ways of communicating if that is the case. End of the day, the major asset of any mining company is the workforce, and that comes before anything, and the welfare and the safety of them. So it's also actually, there's more of a humanitarian angle too, I think. Mining companies have got a responsibility, rather than just finance or help support the clinic down the road or help the local community, but actually be a little bit more wider, open the blinkers a little bit, help ministries, put out information from WHO and other health ministries from their own jurisdictions, and also try and put a helping arm around governments' administrations and say, look, we will get through this. When, we don't know, but in the meantime, can we try and offer you support in any way we can? And I think as a result of that, then I think a mining company is widening its brief and being more responsible.
Mm-hmm. And then you answered that question. You talked a little bit about communicating with shareholders. What's your advice to mining companies as to how best to communicate with shareholders? Specifically, what do they need to know now? And then how you best kind of convey that sort of information? Do you have any sort of guidelines or advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, I mean, the shareholders, like I said, their main concern is what's their investment doing? I mean, they've seen over the past, 3-4 weeks, I mean, massive volatility in the major markets across the world. I mean, they're looking at their share prices of their investments and they're going, wow, what's going on? And they haven't seen anything like this for for decades. So that is their main concern. What do the corporates have to do? Well, they have to inform the market of where they are. What is the snapshot of their business under this crisis? And what are the plans to safeguard their workforce, minimize disruption, and what are the plans of handling it in the next few weeks ahead? So those are the three things that a company has to try and communicate with their shareholders. And like I said just before, with AGMs and financial reporting, yeah, things may get delayed, and the usual way of an AGM may change too. So it's all about, we've all got to adjust to a different mindset. There's a different routine. We're all working from home or from being self-isolated, and therefore communication is vital to all your stakeholders, shareholders and non-shareholders.
Mm-hmm. And Ilja, what's been the main questions that shareholders have been asking you? How has Tharisa been communicating in a timely fashion to shareholders?
Look, obviously they want to know if the investment is safe. I think that's what it boils down to. But it takes a step back. You know, we're in the position we have been communicating with shareholders quite effectively, I would say, for quite some time. We have a very open communication line, and that stems down from the CEO downwards. He's very open to discuss matters. We have a relatively tight shareholder register, so we pretty much know who our shareholders are quite intimately. So we're happy to jump on a call with whoever would like to talk to us and have questions. We were very early in communicating the first communication, acknowledging that that the lockdown will take place, and these are the steps that we're taking. We were very quick to inform the market of various force majeures that needed to kick in, because those are also regulatory announcements that one needs to put out. We now find ourselves in a situation where we actually have quarterly results tomorrow, so there's an opportunity to update the market with regards to the previous quarter, for them to understand what basis we were at before the lockdown took place, and what that means once the lockdown is lifted, how quickly we can get to resuming normal operations. And I think that's an important factor. I think everybody understands right now that things are very, very complex. As soon as we have some finality on some of the balance sheet items, we'll obviously communicate that to the market. And it simply is taking those various steps. I think what is important, though, is when you communicate, is not to, just because your competitor has put something out doesn't mean you have to rush out now and put something out within the next 5 minutes, because you might be putting something out that is not relevant or actually distracts from the next message that you want to put out. You can imagine the amount of information flow that comes out, both from companies, and let's not forget this second-hand communication coming out from the media. And I would say the analysts who are also looking to write about something. So you need to communicate what is relevant to your stakeholders. The form of communication, I think, is relatively easy. These days with electronic means, the information flows very, very quickly direct to the relevant party. So you don't have to start scrambling for that information. That's the easy part. But make sure that what you put out is relevant and is concise. People don't have time to read. There's so much coming out. Make sure that that information is concise, and make sure that it is relevant to the questions that you may have received from shareholders, where you've said, yes, we will answer those, and we will give you that answer. We have a very good relationship with our sell-side analysts. I certainly speak to them on a weekly basis, not particularly around Tharisa, but I think about the mining industry in general. And through that communication, I also hear from them backwards what is happening in the market. So, to try and understand what their thinking is, to try and understand what people are looking for, and then through that information flow, maybe tailor-make the communication that we put out to say to the investors out there, well, these are the major questions that you were asking for the analysts on all your investments. They will certainly apply to us to an extent, so let's try and start answering certain elements of those questions in the communication that we put out. Yeah, and then I think, as we discussed, as Charles mentioned, it boils down to those personal relationships. We have all the possible tools available to speak to people, make use of them, and phone them up. I can tell you right now, 2-3 of the analysts that I speak to, they are as frustrated sitting at home. So to hear a voice, to hear somebody else, the psychological effect of investing, I think starts playing a major role on that. We had a call with a major shareholder last week. suddenly there were 7 from that company on the line. I think they just wanted to hear a different voice, but then take advantage of that opportunity to say, well, guys, fire away questions. And if they don't have any questions, then, well, they had the opportunity to ask those.
Yeah,
I think you're right. Just to jump in there, I think reassurance is key here. You know, especially to shareholders from company.
Yes.
Obviously, there's the press release, but it's just the reassurance that we're on it. You know, and we know we're taking measures, and just giving reassurance to shareholders is critical.
sure. Just actually, one of the questions that we've been sent in by the audience, it'd be best to ask yourself, Ilja. Are you providing your local employees with personal protecting equipment?
Yes, certainly. If they are on site, we've had previously anyway. So again, I know this sounds repetitive, but fortuitously, we use dust masks on the mine anyway already. The standard FFP2 mask that we've had, because of the environment that we're working in. It's an open pit environment, and we have a mechanized mine, so we use those anyway already. So for starters, we had those on site, and that protocol has just been enhanced. Secondly, what we are providing to our employees, every truck, we have 350 pieces of Caterpillar equipment, as I said, has alcohol sanitizer in it. Every employee gets that. And then on the entrance to site, there is alcohol, the normal sort of hand spray that you put on. We obviously have change rooms, we have change houses, soap is available for people to wash themselves. And then most importantly, social distancing. So that's the other aspect. So I'm sure you've got the same in Europe, where certain supermarkets have put red lines on the floor. Please keep that distance, or people are keeping the distance. That's exactly how we do it. We don't have larger groups than 25 people. So we brief the mining crew that goes into the pit outside anyway. So we are in a fresh air environment. I think that's an important factor to consider. But secondly, there's only 25 people per unit that gets briefed, and they stand apart a minimum of 3 meters. So briefing takes longer because we have to brief smaller groupings, and the ones that are looking after on care and maintenance. But that's how we do it. So yeah, the personal protection equipment has been on site for as long as we have, and that what is provided. And as much as of the alcohol sanitizer that was available, we made available to the individuals as much as they could. And I think this is again, we are lucky in the sense that we don't have a lot of staff that act with one another. You know, we're not an underground mine where a lot of guys have to go into a cage, have to go underground, stand next to each other. I mean, we are the safest place you can be for 8 hours is sitting in your Caterpillar truck, because it's you yourself in that environment. So it's most probably, from social distancing, the best thing to do is to sit in that truck.
Sure. Coming back to yourself, Charles. We've obviously talked about the communication via websites. What have you advised your clients in terms of communication via websites and social media?
I think this is really important, actually. Probably more because everyone's stuck at home. Everyone's online. Well, a lot of people are able to access the internet. So, and as we all know, the company's website is your shop window, and so I think it's very important. I think a lot of mining companies are starting to do it, not a lot, but I would advise that they had a separate page on the website just purely focused on COVID-19, which would note all your COVID-19 announcements. It would have a section on preparedness. It would have a section educating staff, even some of the humanitarian efforts that you're helping local communities. It could have links, like I mentioned earlier, to the WHO and department and health departments at government level. And I think I definitely would look at using, well, this is just the website, but I definitely look at using, focus on hygiene as well would be another big message, and also how to protect others. Would be another key message on the website. But I would seriously advise starting a COVID-19 page, especially if you have a large workforce. If you're just an exploration, maybe not. But if you're a producing big mining business, then I think it deserves the airtime on your website. And I also would look at infographics as well. Like Ilja said, look, we've got so much going on online now with webinars and emails throwing and with video conferencing. you know, our attention span has been distracted a lot. So I've definitely used interesting infographics and schematics to get the messages across on your website. So that's sort of website. With regards to social media, again, it's doubly important than ever before now. As we all know, it's instant opinion, it's instant comment, and therefore I would stress to mining companies to monitor your social media channels even closer than ever before, and respond quickly if needed. If the comments or questions are coronavirus related, then it's important that you respond. When possibly in the past we haven't responded as quickly as one might have done, but it's very important to stick to the message. For example, if a mining company has already agreed a policy and measures to handle coronavirus, then of course, if you're going to respond online, it's important that you don't get distracted from the pre-agreed policy. But both channels, Andrew, are vital at the moment, because they are the communication channels that everyone is using doubly, triply more than ever before.
Sure. And Ilja, how have you told your staff to communicate on social media, and what changes have you done to your website?
So, as per Charles's advice, our front page now has got COVID-19. We used to have a scrolling banner with the sort of headlines. It's static now. Although we are .com because we are a Cyprus registered holding company in South Africa, the government has actually made every .co.za website, has forced them to put COVID-19 information on the website or link it to the government website. So you got to look at it as a company, you suddenly have to deal with quite a large issue. So you say to yourself, well, can I do this better than the communication that is out there already? So looking at two specific issues. One is the government has a very good WhatsApp line, and everybody uses WhatsApp these days, we know this, where you simply go hi to this WhatsApp number, and all the information, daily information, is updated in local languages also. I think it's up to 6 languages now in South Africa. So that's the number that we use, and that's a centralized information portal for everybody in South Africa to use. We use it at a corporate level. We check it out regularly, but we certainly have distributed that number to all the staff to get information there. The second important aspect is to remember that the Minerals Council, as I said, has done exceptionally well in not just communicating to the mining companies, but putting out information graphics that the mining companies can use. And we use most of those information graphics ourselves, because they're available, so we don't have to take up extra manpower to recreate those. We use our intranet, we use WhatsApp communications to send out those pictorials. But what is important is the guy might have a colleague working for another mine who now gets, hopefully, from the other mine that's also a member of the Minerals Council, exactly the same information. So you're not getting confusing messages being sent out, whereas one person says, well, you should wear a mask, and somebody else says, well, you shouldn't be wearing a mask. At least the information flow, I'm talking about not on the work environment when you're walking around on the outside, at least the information flow comes from a centralized point. So again, the Minerals Council information, the infographics are very effective, and we simply adopt those to ourselves. We do then internally keep our staff through the intranet and through WhatsApp communication and through communication on site for those who are taking part in the care and maintenance operations with the various infographics available. And then again, you know, through the various management structures on site, the guys are briefed every morning as to what's going on, and there's a question and answer session available. So for shareholders out there, yes, there's the website. I think that's point number one. All the information relating to COVID is in one centralized depository, so they don't have to go searching around on the website. And then on site, we make use of existing communication that is available through various structures. And then obviously we tailor make certain information available just to our staff specifically.
Before COVID-19 started, ESG was on everyone's lips. How has COVID-19 impacted ESG? Some people who I speak to say that maybe CEOs have put ESG from being the top of their in tray to the middle of their in tray. Is that true? I'll go to Charles first, and then Ilja.
Interesting, isn't it? It was all about CSR, wasn't it, a few years ago? And I think ESG is now overlapped CSR. CSR is part of ESG. But going back to your questions, and yeah, I think a lot of mining companies have definitely sat up and taken taking it more seriously, only because there's just more ethics funds and more environmentally aware funds. There's more green funds than ever before, and there's more generalist investors than specialists. So there's a mixed message there. I think mining companies are post COVID-19 will now sit up, I think, and want to do the right thing morally, with regards to healthcare for their workforce, with regards to the environment, with regards to hygiene, sanitation, all this sort of thing. Because at the end of the day, it's the workforce that is the major asset and the most important. So yeah, I think in terms of when this is over, and it is when, we just don't know when, I do think management teams are going to very much put that on the agenda on management meetings, when before it probably was not high up on their agenda. Yeah, I think their agenda will change on the back of actually making sure their workforce is safe, and that they are fully educated in understanding on how important hygiene is, to make sure that that won't happen again or has the same impact.
Mm-hmm. And yourself, Ilja?
Look, business is continuing. Don't forget about that. COVID is throwing a bit of a curveball into business, but business generally is continuing. And this is what I addressed earlier when we put structures into place, where we said, well, we have an 8:30 management meeting every morning. Now, there's no excuse not to be there, for starters. If you're in a senior management role, you don't need to be told that you need to be at a meeting. If there's a structure in place at 8:30 in the morning, that's when you're there. And business continues. It's not like you suddenly everything has changed. So I think importantly, you should continue with business as much as possible and deal with the COVID issues as they fit into your business. So we've got results coming out. Hopefully at the end of May, there might be a curveball thrown at, because it's quite complex to do an audit when nobody is allowed to go into the office and you have to do everything remotely. But the fact that we need to put out results still continues, and that's part of your governance, I guess, in the sense that you need to put this out. When we're looking at running the operations, even on care and maintenance, when we looked at how we're going to go about it, we said, well, we have safety crews on site anyway that are part of the normal day-to-day operations. Now we're looking at care and maintenance. There will be safety crews as part of that care and maintenance. So again, that's sort of, I guess, the environmental safety aspect that one needs to consider. And on the social side, the community owns 6% of our mine. So everybody is in the same boat, and everybody would like to ensure that the mine continues as soon as possible, and that the mine is not hampered in terms of getting back to a restart as quickly as possible once the COVID lockdown is lifted. So as much as you're dealing with COVID issues as an issue, overall, you need to continue with business, and as part of that business, your ESG responsibility and how you react to that, and what you do, and how you've looked into that, measurement tools, governance tools, reporting, continues as a function of that business. And I think those companies who most probably take that on board effectively will come out of this possibly stronger than completely saying, oh, there's a big drama, we need to change our entire business. Now, we've only had a lockdown for 2 weeks. We have certain, because of the type of operation that we run, I think we are relatively well shielded from some of the issues. I think if I was running an airline, maybe I'd be giving you a slightly different view of how life will continue post COVID-19. But for us, the building blocks were there, and we need to make sure that those don't crumble, and then post-COVID reassess those and say, where can we act faster, where could we have acted better, and then on the back of that start implementing that as part of our ESG program.
Sure. We've had quite a few questions sent in by the audience, and apologies that we haven't got time to cover them all off. But one question that I would like to ask is, perhaps I'll just direct it to yourself, Charles, is which aspects of crisis communication strategies and plans should companies consider reviewing and improving when this is over? How might this process be integrated with companies' risk management processes?
Well, you know what? That's a good question. I'll tell you, and one of the reasons I think is that actually a lot of mining companies, their crisis communication manual, if they have one, is usually quite antiquated. And I bet you one other thing is that their crisis communications have never covered the situation like a pandemic before. So you're sort of setting up a new crisis communication strategy straight away. So to answer the question, yes, it needs updating. Secondly, the crisis communications with this situation is new, and therefore it has to be acted and agreed quickly. So you agree communications channels. I'm sure a lot of mining companies have their own COVID-19 committee or meeting group, which could include a medical advisor, things like that, to really be on top of it and in constant communication, and therefore they're ready if an outbreak happens on one of their assets, or if actually another crisis happens amongst the crisis that's already happening. So you've got a double whammy crisis happening at the same time. Now that is a communications challenge, but my advice would be that every mining company should have some sort of COVID management team meeting every morning, like Ilja said, so they're just on top of everything, and that everyone is fully aware of what happens when a crisis happens, what are the communications channels, what are the things that they can say, and then act upon it.
I'm quite kind of conscious that we've only got another sort of like 5 minutes left. So I just want to briefly sort of switch from external communication to internal communication. And just asking a question that is definitely on like everyone's lips is how will COVID-19 change the mindset of work for the mining industry? Perhaps I can ask yourself, Charles, followed by Ilja.
I think well, we've sort of touched on it a bit, a bit earlier on, with ESG. I think, like I said, it's all about the importance of the well-being of your workforce. I think it's also really my big comment on this. I think it's going to actually open the eyes to mining companies to be more supportive on the administration or government where they operate in. And like I said, not just obviously it's their operations and their workforce is the priority, but also to offer a wider support to local community, to regional areas, as well as the actual administration of where they're operating from. Because at the end of the day, they're all going to feel an economic downturn on the back of what's happened here. So if mining companies can actually not just assist their own operations and make sure their own issues are under control, but if they can also try and help where they operate and the administration and administering the country to weather this potential economic downturn once this COVID-19 has passed us by, I think that's another way of that could change mindset on the back of what's happening at the moment.
Then I guess just the same question to Ilja, but also just to add in one of the questions sent in by our audience is what are your thoughts on like how the mindset of work will go and change, and also what role do you think virtual reality will play in the future of mining communications?
Look, I'm not too sure if what we're doing right now is virtual reality, but it certainly is a reality that we need to deal with. I think the COVID has forced us to start making use of tools more effectively that we already had available, but I guess we were quite comfortable with the fact that we actually wanted to be in an office and speak to one another. And I don't think anything will ever replace face-to-face interaction. That's as simple as that. But I think we could be smarter about using tools like this, which then frees up time in the sense that, our operations aren't that far away from corporate office, but I think of some of the larger companies, that are spread all around the world. You need to make use of these tools to sort of say, well, how does one communicate with companies on a global scale? The uses of WhatsApps are available. Virtual reality, I think if I look at virtual reality, the way I interpret it, I think will be very difficult to use in mining right now, because the information flow that is available is, you still need people on the ground. I don't think anything will be completely automated, particularly in a developing world such as South Africa. Just touching on ESG very quickly, I know in Australia, for example, they use driverless vehicles. I could use that in South Africa, but that would mean another 800 people wouldn't have a job, which means 8,000 people wouldn't eat. So the chances of us moving to driverless vehicles anytime soon isn't exactly there. So you've got to adapt that ESG side of things. But how does one communicate? I think the important factor is, I think for those people listening on the webinar who work in communication needs to be a management function. It's not just a nice product to have. So I think that needs to be very important. And if you haven't realized how important that management function is in this environment, then I don't think you'll ever realize where it needs to fit in an organization. And I think it is regular communication, and it's a two-way communication street, particularly on the internal communication side. And you simply need to put the structures into place and invest both in training and understanding of communication so that people can make use of it, and hopefully then allow the company to communicate more effectively one way, whereas employees can communicate into the company on the other way.
Okay, and I'm just going to just sneak in like one extra sort of like question, probably best directed to yourself, Ilja. Is that, do you think that the situation triggered by COVID-19 is leading to yourself considering more technology solutions to assist your operations?
I think we have a lot of technology solutions available already. And, you know, we could most probably run the mine completely autonomous. But as I said, then I would have other issues in the sense that I would be creating more unemployment in a country where we have 35% unemployment already. So is that something that I want to start implementing? You know, you've got to balance that out. Maybe some of the shareholders would say, well, it's the best thing you can do because you run your machinery optimally and who cares about the personnel? Well, that's not the type of business that I work for, and that's not how we view things. So we will always have employees on site. Technology allows you to make decisions far quicker. I think that's the important aspect, and you need to make use of technology in the sense that information flows as quickly as possible. Just like we spoke initially about communicating effectively to the market and making use of those tools, you need to make use of technology internally to start information flow getting in there. So email used to be the fastest. These days, WhatsApp communication to a broad set of people is the fastest way of communicating both information and data. And then you need to start working out how do you make use of that data that you receive, and on the back of that, how do you make decisions on that. So we know from a processing point of view, technology is available, so we know very quickly what goes in the front end, what comes out the back end, and where the problem might be. So technology will always evolve, but I think it's horses for courses how you start making use of that technology and what fits in the environment that you operate in, versus a highly mechanized mine in the north of Australia running iron ore, where I believe they can run completely autonomous, but then again, they don't have 35% unemployment in that area.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer, Ilja. We've actually overrun slightly, and we are definitely now out of time. So I think that all that remains for me to do is just a few closing comments. So thank you to Ilja, thank you to Charles, thank you to all of our listeners for dialing in. And once again, sorry for not being able to get around to answering all of your questions. As I mentioned at the start, all residents will be sent a recording of this webinar. For more great news and content, please check out our Mining Beacon website at www.miningbeacon.com. Don't forget that our Mines and Money London event will be running on the 1st to 3rd of December. Many thanks, and see you again soon.
Goodbye.